We are only 4 days away from the 2022 NHL draft, and we have some pretty significant updates here for you tonight, including the latest trade talk around Montreal, Toronto, Philly, Chicago, and others, the latest free agent rumors, as well as we have a situation developing in Russia that can be quite concerning for pretty much all 32 NHL teams. We'll discuss that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot to go over here, a lot of variety of trade and free agent rumor talk around a variety of teams and players. As we're only 4 days away now from the NHL draft, so we're expecting a fairly busy week this week, and leading into the draft and at the draft, we should see a fair bit of activity. You should get hopefully a little bit more clarity on some trades and a lot of free agent movement and things like that. But first tonight, I do want to quickly touch on a story out of Russia that appears to be quite concerning. We don't have a lot of firm details, to be honest, in my opinion, based on what I've read around a variety of news sources. It seems to be difficult to get a lot of clarity and really confirm exactly what is happening over there. But Flyers goaltender prospect Ivan Fedotov, who was a 2015 draft pick, and he's remained in Russia, just signed with the Flyers just not long ago, back in May, and was expected to make the jump to North America to play in the Flyers system this coming season for 22-23, has been detained in Russia as of Friday, it appears. And from what I can see, it looks like he's being detained for evading military service. I've seen some reports saying that the crime was the fact that he wanted to leave Russia and go play in North America. I don't know if that's actually legit or not. I've seen other reports indicating that he's after being detained, that he was not feeling well and was hospitalized. There's a lot of different stuff going on. I've seen different reports as well saying that they feel like there's a chance that he might have to go fight in the war against Ukraine as a form of punishment. Like, there's a lot of different stuff, and I don't really know what's true and what isn't, so we're not going to get into anything clearly here as facts. I know even Elliotte Friedman touched on it in his 32 Thoughts blog today. But again, we want to be careful what we say here, because we really don't know the full scope of really 100% of what's going on. But I do know that based on what NHL reporters have been kind of seeing and saying and talking to teams about, it seems like there's a lot of teams, pretty much everybody, is kind of on edge and a little bit nervous when it comes to their Russian players going home for the summer. Now, of course, the last couple of years have not been ordinary years with a lot of the travel restrictions and COVID stuff. Like, not everybody has been able to be home and move about and see family and all those things. So, this year with a lot of that stuff being lifted, that a lot of players are going to want to make it back home if they haven't been, much in the past few years. So with that being said, though, obviously there's a whole different situation going over there between Russia and Ukraine. So certainly something to be, on edge about, I think is fair to say. But at the same time, there's concerns over, will their players be able to come back if they do go home? When this evading military service, it's not really clear on what exactly they need to do. Like in Friedman's blog, he wondered if they might be able to strike a deal where maybe he has to play in Russia a little bit longer or something. It was just a thought on his part. He really had no way to know. It just is really concerning, and you have to wonder the spin-off effect here, the implications for the young Russian prospects at the 22 NHL draft. Like, is this going to take some of their Russian prospects that are expected to be likely first-round picks? And is it going to plummet their draft stock? Because if they're going to have issues getting work visas to come to North America to play, or if there's going to be any issues with government over there holding them back, or anything like that, it's going to have a big impact for sure. Like, you're looking at players like Yurov and Mironashenko and others, and there's some other real top prospects like next year too coming that are from Russia that appear to be some of the top players in the draft. So it's really concerning, and we don't know a lot about it. It's just something that we need to watch and be careful to report on what's accurate, what's not. That's why I'm not really getting into what I'm not calling anything facts. It's just a concerning situation that we're trying to learn more about, and hopefully this doesn't have a major impact on a lot of other players, but it certainly seems like it has the potential. So it's just something for us to watch here for the time being. Now, as I mentioned, we have a lot to talk about when it comes to the latest rumblings around the league. Majority of what I'm talking about here comes from the latest 32 Thoughts, a written blog from Elliotte Friedman today. It appears like it's going to be his last one for the season. I do believe him and Jeff Merrick will still be doing podcasts, but we're going to dive into some of this content. He kind of breaks it down. This could be a long video if I went through over everything he said. It's a long blog where he goes through basically all the teams and what each team is kind of working on leading into the draft. So we're only going to touch on a few points here today, and I'll probably go over some more of this in coming videos over the next couple days. But when it comes to Montreal, essentially, like, there's a lot of reports. We've talked about this on the channel already about them wanting to make a big splash at the draft. Different reports that he touched on about them wanting to get another top 10 pick. There's been obviously the rumblings about them in New Jersey over a 1-2 swap or something to that effect, or does New Jersey want to move up to get Slafkovsky? We don't really know what they're going to do, but expect Montreal to be busy in that regard for sure. He does mention though that they are testing the market when it comes to other trades, and like not necessarily draft related, but guys like Christian Dvorak and Jeff Petrie for sure are expected to have a lot of trade conversations around them. And he says possibly Josh Anderson. Obviously, I think a lot of people have been talking about Anderson. He's been getting a ton of news being discussed on possible trades around this player, and I'm not even convinced myself that Montreal wants to trade him. Doesn't sound like Elliotte really thinks that they want to move him either, but like I said, if a team comes calling with a deal that they just can't pass up, then it could happen. But I think that more likely he stays. But players like Dvorak and Petrie, certainly expect them to likely be on the move if they can find the right deal. It's difficult to say exactly where they go, where they end up, or what the returns are, but certainly players that could be on the go. Of course, he also touches on the fact that, as another topic I've mentioned briefly before, is that there was some trade talk between Montreal and Ottawa near the end of the season, close to the deadline, around young Senator Colin White. Now, Colin White, of course, former agent Ken Hughes, so there's a lot of familiarity there. Those two know each other well, of course. Not only before that, like they've been familiar with each other for a long time, long before Colin was in the NHL. Colin White's a player who's had some injury issues, but has a lot of potential, and has just not really had a great time finding it in Ottawa. And there is belief that Ottawa would be interested in moving him. Now, of course, he did have one kind of better year a couple of years back, and they signed him to a long-term contract extension because it looked like he was on the rise. He signs a 6-year deal, over $4 million per year. Of course, he's a couple of years into that now. There was rumors about a potential buyout where he's still young enough that he's a 1/3 buyout instead of a 2/3 buyout. It's pretty cheap. I don't know if Ottawa will go down that road. Maybe if they can't find a trade closer to the buyout deadline, then maybe they do that. I don't know. But consider the fact that these two teams are likely going to resume conversations. No guarantees it happens, but Friedman really questions whether or not those conversations continue and a deal might get done. We'll see. Now, when it comes to Alex Debrincat, one of the teams that's definitely in the mix on that is the Philadelphia Flyers. Now, of course, no guarantee anything gets done. We heard reports that one team had offered Chicago a first-round pick this year, a first-round pick next year, and a fairly good-looking prospect, and they were rejected. So, the price tag is high. We know that for sure. I wouldn't, be shocked if the price tag ended up being at least one additional good asset on top of that. But a couple of things that the Flyers would be able to give up that the Hawks would certainly be very interested in would be this year's number 5 overall pick and one of their top prospects in Bobby Brink. So that appears to be a rumor I've seen in multiple places being discussed. It tells me that during these conversations, those are likely assets the Flyers are willing to put on the table if they have any chance to get an Alex Debrincat trade done. We know LA was in on that and switched gears to Fiala, so they were a team in the mix and are out now. There's a number of other teams that are reportedly interested in Debrincat. No big shocker there. But of course, the Flyers are definitely involved for sure. Now, he does talk about Debrincat and the Hawks here, of course, in the blog, wondering if a Debrincat trade could certainly have a big influence on the futures of Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane. Now, he says, as of right now, the Blackhawks have not made Kane and Taves available via trade. They have not gone to other teams and make it known that they're willing to move them, mainly because they have a no-move clause, so they can certainly call their own shot here. They can reject or accept any trade they want, so certainly it doesn't make sense to make them widely available if you don't know where they might be willing to waive for. They've kind of expected them to kind of come forward, make it known that they would like a trade, and if they do that, they'll gladly try to help them and move on. And he wonders if this might be a way for Chicago to manage this situation. You have to think that strictly from a business perspective, that it would be best for the Blackhawks to move their two longtime star players. They can get some good assets in return. I don't know that it really makes sense for them to re-sign either player after their final year of their contract expires at the end of the current upcoming season. I mean, Patrick Kane is a player who's still playing at a high level, and to me, like, if he really wants to play there and he wants to be a mentor for some of the young players, maybe you keep him around. I don't know if it really makes sense to keep Taves, but in Kane's case, like, to me, he still has high value, right? So, like, I think if you could consider keeping him, but at the same time, I don't know that you really need to do that either. If he prefers to go on and chase the Stanley Cup and try to win elsewhere, that makes sense too, right? Because obviously, you have to respect the player's wishes. You give him that contract, and at the same time, there's no guarantee Chicago is going to re-sign them. At the end of the day, it takes two parties to agree on a new contract. So could this be a way for them to kind of entice them to want to go? I don't think they're trading Debrincat or trying to get Taves and Kane to want to leave. I don't think that's the case at all. As we've said before, given Debrincat's high value right now, they can get a really big haul, a big return to help for the future. He's going to be owed a significant qualifying offer at the end of this season, so going into next year, like a $9 million qualifying offer, which is just doesn't make sense for them to have a player who's going to be into his 30s before they're competitive again, making that kind of huge money. It just doesn't really make sense. So why not move him along and get as much as you can, right? So that only makes sense. And if moving him will entice Taves and Kane to want to go as well, and you can get even more return and get more money off the books, that makes sense as well. So it'll be interesting to see if there's kind of a domino effect there in Chicago once this Debrincat trade comes to be, because it sounds like there's been enough talk and action around it that it wouldn't be shocking if it gets done here, whether either by the draft or into the early part of free agency in the next couple of weeks here. Now, when it comes to Carolina, they're another team I want to touch on quickly as well. We had previously learned that the Canes had given permission to Ethan Bear to speak to other teams. Well, sounds like they've done the same thing for Tony DeAngelo. Of course, we know he signed a one-year deal last year after getting bought out in New York, certainly after all the issues he ran into there, but he had a really good year this year. Certainly can command much more money than he's earning. He's likely looking at, I'm going to say, at least probably a $6 to $7 million contract on a 4 or 5 year deal would probably be something that he's likely looking at. Carolina is not afraid to tell their players, listen, this is what we're going to pay you, and this is the best we can do. If you think you can get more elsewhere, go shop your services around. Like, they do that regularly. That's not something they're afraid of. So they've given him permission as well. So this makes it sound like there's less of a likely chance for him to be back. But of course, if he goes to the open market and talks to teams and there's nothing there, maybe he comes back and settles. But they did the same thing for Dougie Hamilton last year, and he ended up going to New Jersey. So we'll see on that. And they've also made it known as well, Friedman's reporting, that Vincent Trocheck and Nino Niederreiter, a couple other key pieces in Carolina, are also expected to test free agency, so they likely will not be signing a new deal in Carolina, at least before free agency starts. I wouldn't completely rule out a return, but I think the chances of them all leaving are probably pretty decent, but only time will tell and see how that goes for sure. Now, when it comes to the Maple Leafs, we all know the Leafs are going to be an interesting team to watch. They usually are, especially as the pressure mounts on Kyle Dubas and Brendan Shanahan and the win with this Big Four group that they've committed so much money to. The first round exits, we know the history, and as each year goes by without the success, then the pressure mounts, right? So they're always interesting to watch in that regard. But this year, right now, they're in a little bit of a different scenario than they've been in years past. It seems like goaltending, for the first time in a long time, is by far their biggest area of focus right now, and certainly the biggest area they need to be worried about, because they've had good goaltending. Yes, it hasn't been perfect, of course, but Jack Campbell's been good for them the past few years. Freddie Anderson had a good run there. They might not have been able to win in the playoffs, but I don't know that we can really put that all on goaltending. I know there was a few times when Freddie Anderson could have been better, but for the most part, it's been a stable position for them. At the moral of the story here, and now there's a real uncertainty, right, with Campbell being a UFA and with a tight cap, and the possibility of signing him as it's there. It's not impossible, but it's not going to be easy, and it sounds like the odds of it happening right now appears to be slim. But as I've mentioned before, things can change, and they can change rather quickly with some flexibility being created by a trade or a reconsideration of an offer or anything like that. You just never know. But it does sound like, based on what Friedman's saying, that the Oilers are heavily linked to Jack Campbell, very high in their list. Seems like Ken Holland has zeroed in on him as being one of their top priorities as well. So they very well might lure another Leaf out the West Coast like they did with Zach Hyman last year. So if that's the case, then what happens next? Where do the Leafs turn? There really isn't a strong goaltending crop of free agents this year, in my opinion. You do have guys like Marc-Andre Fleury, you have Darcy Kemper, Ville Husso. Where do they turn? I know he does mention in his blog about Darcy Kemper maybe being somebody that they talk to, but of course, is he going to re-sign in Colorado? We don't know that yet. Will he end up wanting to go to Toronto? We just don't really know what the future holds there, because there hasn't been a lot of talk around a few of these guys like Kemper, because their season just literally ended a few days ago after winning the Stanley Cup. There's not really a lot of time here for a lot of these players to really focus on that stuff here just yet. But obviously goaltending is high on the priority list, and it's a big question mark on where it goes. Friedman does mention, though, he doesn't necessarily see a trade for John Gibson out of Anaheim. I wouldn't rule out a John Gibson trade somewheres, but based on what he's saying is that when the Leafs and the Ducks have talked before, they've had a hard time really finding common ground to make a deal happen, and just doesn't think it's something that they're going to be able to line up, although they may have conversations around it. Of course, he does mention that a player like Valeri Nichushkin in Colorado would be a perfect fit for the Leafs, but very unlikely that they'd be able to afford him. And he wonders if Max Domi might be a fit in Toronto. Of course, we know his father, Ty Domi, was a longtime Leaf player, a Leaf legend in many ways, for being quite the scrapper in his day. So we'll have to see if maybe Max makes a jump to the Leafs. He's a UFA as well here, likely not going back to Carolina after he was acquired at the deadline. I'm not sure that Domi's really going to give them a ton of offense per se, but he could be a good bottom six player if he's willing to sign for the right price. Of course, that's the key in Toronto, is they've had and they're going to have to continue to have players sign for value deals to play in their third and fourth line to round out our roster for a chance to win and a chance to play there. So we'll see, but he certainly links Max Domi as being potential. He does say as well, he mentions Claude Giroux in both the Ottawa segment and the Toronto segment. He says that the Leafs probably have a talk to him, but there's the only way that the Leafs could even consider Claude Giroux would be by trading one of their big four, which he doesn't see happening right now. Like I said, unless they're going to pull off a Nylander trade or something substantial that would shock everybody at this point, it seems unlikely that they're going to be making too big of a splash in that regard. The main area, like I said, they need to focus on is goaltending, with potential for Max Domi, according to what Friedman is saying, for maybe a bottom six role. But he also talks about Rasmus Sandin. In that situation, he describes as being trickier than the Leafs hoped or wanted it to be. But of course, by signing Giordano and the other guys they have on the left side already, there's not really much room there for Sandin to get playing time. So it makes you wonder if Sandin might be unwilling to sign or playing a little bit hardball in this next contract, wanting more of a clarity on his future and what kind of role he's going to have. And as much as they probably don't want to move him, I wonder if they would feel possibly forced at all at any point. And you also have to wonder if he does hold off signing, if he could be an offer sheet target. I mentioned him in one of my offer sheet target videos that we did a week or two ago, talking about a possibility for Sandin, just because of the role that he's been given there, and with all the players ahead of him now, you have to wonder if he might see an opportunity to make more money and get a bigger role elsewhere. But that's a little presumptuous on my part, but it makes you wonder given where things are at. But based on what Friedman's describing, it sounds like it might be a tricky situation for the Leafs to come to terms with Rasmus Sandin. So let me know your thoughts on what we discussed here today down in the comments. Should be an extremely busy week. I expect more trades leading into the draft here over the next few days, so let me know your thoughts on what you think is going to happen down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.